In the winter of 1894, deep in the northern reaches of Norway, there lay a village so small that it was almost invisible on any map. Surrounded by thick pine forests and mountains wrapped in snow, it clung to the edge of a vast frozen lake known to locals as Isvan, the ice water. For generations, the lake had been both a blessing and a curse. It provided fish in the summer, but in the winter, when it froze solid, strange whispers were said to rise from beneath the ice. Most villagers dismissed them as tricks of the wind, except for Elin Nyström. Elin was a quiet woman in her late 30s, with eyes the color of storm clouds and hair as black as a raven's wing. She lived alone in a small cabin at the edge of Isvan, far from the other villagers. It was whispered that she could see things, deaths, accidents, and storms, before they happened. She never claimed to be a witch, nor sought to harm anyone, but people kept their distance, as if fearing that her visions might spread like disease. One evening, as the first snowstorm of the season approached, Elin walked out onto the frozen lake. The surface was like glass, reflecting the dim orange glow of the setting sun. She knelt, placing her gloved hand on the ice. Beneath it, she swore she could see shadows moving, slow, deliberate shapes, as if people were walking just under the surface. And then she heard it, a soft, low whisper. "Elin, do not go to the village tomorrow." The voice was faint, as though coming from deep underwater. She stood quickly, her heart pounding. She had heard the lake before, but never had it spoken her name. The next day, she stayed home. That morning, the frozen roof of the old church collapsed under the weight of snow, killing 2 people who had gone there for morning prayer. When word reached her cabin, Elin simply closed her eyes. The lake had warned her. The news of the church collapse spread quickly through the small village. Some called it an accident, but others whispered that Elin must have known. They remembered seeing her walk on the lake the night before, alone, under the dim light of the setting sun. By evening, the village elder, an old fisherman named Olav, came to her cabin. His thick coat was covered in frost, and his beard held tiny beads of ice. "Elin," he began, his voice heavy with suspicion. "How did you know not to go to the church?" Elin didn't answer right away. She poured him a cup of hot black tea, the steam curling between them like a fragile veil. "I didn't know," she said finally. "The lake told me." Olav frowned. "Do you expect me to believe a body of frozen water speaks to you?" She met his eyes. "It speaks when it must, and when it does, someone always dies." Olav shivered, not from the cold. He left without finishing the tea. That night, as the wind howled across the plains, Elin dreamed she was beneath the ice, walking among hundreds of shadowy figures. They reached out to her, their hands pale and trembling, their lips moving without sound. Then one figure stepped forward, a boy, no more than 10, with hair like pale straw. His eyes were wide with terror. "Elin," he mouthed, though no sound came. "Help me." She woke drenched in sweat. The boy's face burned in her mind. She had never seen him before, but she knew she would. The following morning, a strange commotion stirred in the village square. Elin, wrapped in her heavy wool coat, walked down to see what was happening. A horse-drawn sleigh stood in the snow, surrounded by curious villagers. Inside, wrapped in thick blankets, sat a pale boy with straw-colored hair. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him, the boy from her dream. The sleigh driver, a man from the next valley, explained that he had found the child wandering alone near the forest's edge at dawn. The boy wouldn't speak, wouldn't even give his name. His eyes darted around, wide and unblinking, as if every shadow hid something waiting to pounce. Elin stepped closer, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd. "Do you know who I am?" she asked softly. The boy's gaze snapped to hers. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then, without moving his lips, she heard it, a voice inside her head, the same hollow underwater tone she had heard from the lake. "You came?" She froze. The crowd saw nothing unusual, but Elin felt the air between them turn heavy, as though the lake's icy surface had settled over the square. Olav's voice broke the silence. "We should take him to the priest. If this is some curse—" The boy suddenly screamed. It wasn't the cry of a frightened child, but a sound so sharp and strange it made every hair on Elin's arms stand up. The horses reared, the villagers stumbled back, and somewhere in the distance, a deep crack echoed, the sound of ice breaking. The priest agreed to keep the boy in the church for the night, but Elin knew he wouldn't stay there for long. The lake had shown her his face for a reason. She could feel it, a pull, like invisible threads binding them together. Late that evening, while the village was quiet and snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, Elin heard a faint tapping on her cabin window. She opened the door to find the boy standing there, wrapped in the same blanket, barefoot in the snow. "You'll freeze," she whispered, pulling him inside, but the boy didn't shiver. His skin was cold, almost icy, but he looked at her with steady eyes. "Come," he said aloud for the first time. His voice was soft but urgent. "They'll hear us if we wait." Without asking questions, Elin followed him. They walked through the dark forest until the trees opened to the wide, pale expanse of Isvan. The moonlight painted the frozen surface silver. The boy stepped onto the ice as if he had done it 1,000 times. Elin hesitated, then followed. Each step made the lake groan faintly beneath their feet. At the very center of the lake, the boy stopped and knelt. He pressed his small palm to the ice. "Listen." Elin knelt beside him and placed her own hand down. The cold burned her skin through the glove. At first, there was only silence, and then from deep below, the whispers began. But this time, they weren't just whispers. They were voices, dozens of them, overlapping, pleading, crying. She heard names, fragments of sentences, and then one voice louder than all the rest. "Elin, bring him back!" She pulled her hand away. "Back? From where?" The boy looked at her, and for the first time she saw something ancient in his eyes. Older than the lake, older than the village itself. "From below," he said. "They're waiting for you." The voices faded, leaving only the groan of the ice beneath them. Elin stood, her breath visible in the moonlight, her heart pounding like a drum. "What's below?" she asked. The boy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a spot where the ice seemed thinner, a faint blue glow pulsing underneath. He knelt again and whispered something in a language Elin didn't know. The glow brightened. The ice shifted beneath her feet. "They're trapped," the boy finally said. "The ones the village forgot. The ones they called witches, heretics, thieves. They drowned them here so no one would find them. But the lake remembers, and it wants them back." Elin stared at him. "Back? Into the world?" He nodded slowly. "You're the key. You hear the lake. That means you can open the way." A sudden wind swept across the frozen expanse, howling through the pines. Elin felt something ancient pressing against her thoughts, a weight, a plea. She saw flashes in her mind, pale faces beneath the ice, eyes open, mouths moving in silent screams. Her knees went weak. "If I open it, what happens to me?" The boy's expression didn't change. "You join them, that's the price." Elin's breath caught. For a moment, she thought of turning back, of locking herself in her cabin and pretending none of this had happened. But the images of those trapped souls burned too vividly. She stepped forward. "Tell me how." The boy smiled faintly, not the smile of a child, but something far older, sharper. He reached into the folds of his blanket and pulled out a shard of black ice, jagged and cold enough to sting her skin. "Cut the ice," he said. "The rest will come for you."